All right, we're doing it now no matter what you do. Hello and welcome everybody to episode 76 of Comic DNA, on which we will be discussing Batman Year 100 by Paul Pope. I guess I should introduce myself. I haven't been doing a good job of that, have I, the last couple of episodes?
You gotta get your name out there.
And I don't want to get my name out there, but my name is Aaron Walter, and I am joined once again by my good friends Alex and Taryn. And we are very excited to talk about Batman Year 100. Now, I can say wholeheartedly that Batman Year 100 is my favorite Batman book. This is my favorite Batman book.
Yeah.
I'm not
a Batman expert.
Well,
I've read, the big ones.
Yeah, that's sort of where there's like a little asterisk there, where it's like, right. I'm not a huge Batman collector. I think I'm like a lot of Marvel kids in the 90s and 2000s who read all Marvel books, but really liked Batman because Batman movie, Batman the Animated Series, and there were a handful of books that were around that were good. The Dark Knight Returns is kind of one of the go-tos. Although I prefer, if we're talking Frank Miller books, I prefer Batman Year One, which is illustrated by David Mazzucchelli and not Frank Miller.
Yeah,
and I think that works to the book's favor.
Okay,
but
I actually haven't read that one.
Oh, you haven't? Oh, well, I mean, I would recommend it. It's it's not as high concept as Dark Knight Returns or Year 100, if we'll get into that in a bit. But it's worth it for the Mazzucchelli art. But anyway, we're not here to talk about Frank Miller or David Mazzucchelli. We're here to talk about Batman Year 100. And going with what you're saying, I don't have a lot of Batman books that are like my favorite books. I like the character, and I probably like the animated series more than anything. I do have a shelf full of books. Like I do really like the old Batman. I got like the first book that collects the first Batman comics, from 1930.
Like from like the 30s and 40s.
Yes, those are amazing. Yeah, the Batman.
Like Death to Dr. Death.
Yes. But yeah, I would recommend the Batman Chronicles book that collects the original Batman. I know you can't see very clearly through this webcam, but yes, it does have that amazing Death to Dr. Death panel, which is great. So I do like some of the older stuff in the sense that I just like old comics. But as far as high concept Batman goes, Batman Year 100 is top of my list. Mm-hmm. Alex, I imagine you're probably not too different from me on that one.
Yeah, it's my favorite Batman story that I've read. Part of it is, I'm thinking about this, it's not really like any other Batman story.
Yes.
I don't know if that means I don't really like Batman, because I thought I liked Batman, but yeah. I like this Batman more because it's so its own thing.
We'll get into that, I think. Okay. When we're talking about the book, Taryn, I know. Spoiler alert for everybody. I know you really liked the book. But as somebody who also is probably not a big Batman comics reader, what's your familiarity with Batman?
My main context for Batman was just the more modern movies, the Christopher Nolan ones.
Oh, okay.
And that's it.
Oh yeah. Okay.
And like the general pop culture understanding, but I never really watched in depth any of the animated series. I never watched I never read the comic. I don't think I've actually read any other Batman comics.
Oh, okay.
So, I know the gist of the Batman, as it were.
Right.
But in terms of this format, it was really unique coming at it this way, having seen it from the live action sort of angle.
Well, yeah, Batman is a character, like a mythological figure that has really transcended just comics, you know,
Hmm.
or even just sort of, he even transcended just the concept of the story that he is in. And I think that's
Yeah.
actually kind of what this book is about, and that kind of plays
Yes.
to the favor of what the book is about. Um, so
Batman
yeah,
is a character. He's not only had movies made of his comics, he's had Legos made of his comics, which have in turn been made into
into
movies.
movies. He said movies
Right?
based off of Legos, based off of movies, based off of comics.
Uh-huh.
Yes.
There we go.
Yeah,
It's
that's
preposterous.
so
It's
that's like the saturation of the characters. But
Mhm.
I think anybody listening to this is already well aware of Batman as a character. So let's just like get into this book. Alex, I know you and I are both huge fans of Paul Pope. Taryn, I sort of know that you are, but since
Yeah.
since I know you're more like newer to Paul Pope, I know you've read Battling Boy, right?
Hmm.
Have you read any other Paul Pope books?
Yeah, I did 100%.
Okay.
I read 100%, and then so I'm trying to think because it's been a couple years now.
Yeah. Heavy Liquid.
Yes, I read
Mhm.
Heavy Liquid.
Did you read Heavy Liquid?
I think so.
Okay.
Okay. Of course, I say that, and I'm like, did I?
Yeah.
We have it on our shelf. And
Right.
I think I read.
Well, I did that
Yeah.
like the first time I read, like really started getting into Paul Pope. I read, I have 100%. I have Heavy Liquid. I have, I think there's one other book. I can't remember it. But the thing is like I read the books and I sort of just like forgot what they were. Like, I had a hard time kind of keeping up with the story. I just really read them and just really liked the art and the way the pages flowed. But the story didn't really stick with me, and I had to reread them. And I sort of almost had that same experience with Batman Year 100. The story stuck with me a little bit more because it's a little bit more tuned into my sensibilities, like specifically with what it's about. But I do feel like I didn't have a full appreciation of what it is until after like the second or third reading. I don't know if that means, I mean, maybe I'm just a lazy reader, but I just noticed, I'm just thinking off the top of my head here. I just noticing that is sort of a trend I've had with Paul Pope, even though I would say that he's one of my absolute favorite comic book creators, like working today, hands down.
Yeah.
But I don't mean to keep cutting you off, Taryn. So I would I would really like to hear like what are your general first impressions of this book, coming at it from somebody who's not read Batman comics, but you're familiar with Paul Pope and you're familiar with what Batman is.
The very first impression, and this is what I said right after I finished reading it, was that he's so chunky, like in the way that like an Oreo milkshake is chunk, like there's literal chunks in it, like not that he's fat, like he just has so much substance. And it's not just Batman, it's all of them, like but that Paul Pope, his style uses so much line work that you'll see the stitches and the wrinkles and the creases in the face and stuff, but it's not like in a way that's like, look how many lines I can draw. It's like, it's all in service to the narrative. It shows how gritty things are. It shows how painful things are. It shows how like, how affected by gravity things are. Like it works so well. And it was also so cinematic. Like there's just the way that Paul Pope like has like a hand snapping that leads into the next panel. It's like you see it playing like a movie. It pushes you along and it carries you along. And there's the part where the doctor's patching him back up, and then it cuts to Robin working on the motorcycle, and it shows the same like positioning of the hands on veins versus hands on like these connector cables on a motorcycle. And it's like it's so good. Like you just feel like, oh yeah, that was a good moment. Like as you're reading it, it was just such a good ride. Like you just go along for the ride. So it was real good. I liked it.
I think Paul Pope has a real fluid storytelling. His scenes, I mean, the high action stuff is like really fast paced action, but I think that he just as a comic book artist, like he really knows how to draw your eye across the page and link scenes and really, really just keep it flowing. Like, I think that's like the number one thing I would always use to describe the flowing is like the word I would use to describe Paul Pope's art. Like it's so fluid, and his figures just look really loose, but very like real, like they look like real people. Like, but also like he still is stylized. Like all of his, like he draws people with like lumpy faces and big lips, and it's like they look like real people, but that's not how they're like traditionally depicted in art, right? Exactly, you know. So it's a very unique and kind of almost jarring art style, but I really love it.
Yeah, his pages always read very easily. Like the movement through them is very straightforward. I like how he plays with. He's got that indie comic sensibility, or that artsiness too, where he's good at zooming in on things. Like Ken was saying, with like the surgery and the motorcycle maintenance. Like it's this willingness to draw these almost abstracted panels of really up close, and it's there just for the art. It's just to move the story along. It's not like if out of context, it might almost look a little strange, a little abstract.
Yeah,
but he's willing to kind of zoom in, and you know, it's like an art film, like you that long slow pan of a leaf or something. It's like you didn't need to linger on that so long, but the creator's enjoying themselves. They want you to kind of savor this.
Right.
I like that jumping between the action and those very zoomed in moments.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's no doubt Paul Pope is a master comic book artist. I think that's generally the consensus among a lot of comic book readers, except for the people that just don't like the style, you know. But you know, nothing you can do about that, I suppose. I guess.
Who's gonna hate?
Yeah. But so I don't know. I don't know how much more I could say about the art. I mean, like what? Like, I guess I would say, like, as far as his actual depiction of Batman, I really liked, and this is just going, like, almost echoing what I'm saying about the way I like the way he draws his figures, but I really like the just like the posing that he puts Batman in, I guess is how I would say it. Like, it's not traditional superhero action poses. Like, it looks like kind of like a real guy that's getting jerked around or thrown around or kind of like flying around like crazy. And he always manages to capture just like those unique moments where it just looks really like frantic or spazzy or like it's not your typical like heroic poses that you see in most comic book pages.
Yeah, he'll be like hunched down, like squatting down, or like right on the cover, like he's like in this weird kind of like, he looks kind of like a turtle. Like I don't know what he is. He's kind of all like that. It's it's really awkward, and there's that kind of that's actually one of the details in his costume is that like you can see his wrist poking out between his gloves and his sweater sleeve.
And
it makes him almost feel a little like clownish or something, but then as you're reading it, he really just seems like he's larger than life, and that this sweater is just too small for him, and it would be no matter how big they made the sweater. Like it actually almost serves a better purpose in that like he's got these huge boots and Robin can't fill him, you know, even though he maybe will someday, or he may try. And it's just that idea that it keeps coming back to of like this person is a person, but he's not really a person either. Like, I don't know, there's some really, really good stuff there. So I like the way that they characterize his body or his whole like posture, his demeanor like that. So
Well, I think I'm curious what you think about this, Alex. I think in like a weird way, a lot of Paul Pope's art is almost like purposely unsexy, but at the same time, it kind of is like it has like a sensual nature. I think the way he draws figures, but
Sure.
it's not like overtly sexy the way you see a lot of American art. I mean, you know, I'm not gonna name names, but you know what I mean. Like he's willing to put his characters in like awkward poses because that's real, or like that's like what they would be doing. You know, it's not
Sure.
it doesn't have like a pretty aesthetic to it.
Sure.
It's not slick always.
Yeah, certainly not slick, but
Yeah.
I don't know. I think that's what makes it so appealing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I has an intentional ugliness to it
Yeah.
that reinforces the mood. And I always think with this and with most of his work, but 100% and Heavy Liquid come to mind, that his inks are so heavy and the use of shadow is so heavy, and his shapes are kind of jagged and abstract.
Mm-hmm.
Like again on the cover, he's on top of these smokestacks.
Yeah, it's what. Yeah, it looks
And
like two.
It's strange. It's kind of almost Tim Burton-y.
Yeah.
Although more than Tim Burton-y, because I think it's actually better than that. Not that I hate Tim Burton,
but
it has
I agree.
Kind of like early 20th century German expressionist quality to it.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you guys know,
popping out the big artistic references here.
Like jagged, dark, creepy shadows. It's unsettling.
Brooding, heavy. Yeah.
It's these kind of.
I saw the movie Metropolis.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not. It's certainly not sexy in the traditional comic sense, but
right.
It's. I don't know.
But like, it's true that there is a sensuousness there, despite that, and almost like because of it, because it's real, you can see him like sweating, and you see those lips, and you can almost feel, you know, like there's like really unique triggers of that sort of attraction factor, that sort of like leaning in a little bit kind of thing, that aren't because it's a low cut top or, you know, like a spandex suit, or like a ba-bam, like Superman kind of pose.
Yeah.
It's a lot more subtle, but it's still very present. I think that there's a strong attraction towards this character, whether you can like put your finger on it or not and say, well, yeah, there's like the sex appeal there. It's like, but what is it?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's what makes it so interesting to like experience and talk about, because again, like it's unique, it's different, it's obviously very good, but like intentionally ugly in places and awkward and cramped or crowded, or as we said, just like heavy use of the inks, so it's just like really like dark and obtuse in some ways. But and I love it. So
well, I think it's also that there's kind of a sense of breathing room when you do have these poses or these situations or these moments, whether it's like a talking head or if it's a full a body shot, an action shot. When you watch like modern summer action flicks, it's like 120 minutes of explosions. And it's so like, oh, okay, that's nice. I got to see 97 cars explode during that movie. And in the same way, when you're reading like some of the more traditional kind of comic book appearances of people are very like, okay, it's the same. It's almost cookie cutter. But when you have like most of them being like maybe kind of hunched over, curled around, or flailing or whatever, when you do have those few poses where it's like the one guy smoking a cigarette just kind of casually, where it does suddenly strike that, hey, like that good looking moment where it's like that looks almost like someone posed him there. Then it's like, you know, he has the capability of drawing these poses, but he chooses to only use them in a little bit, and it's so sparingly that when they do happen, you're like, oh wow, like looking good there. Like that's where the kind of it kind of pulls you back into this like, okay, yeah, this is a good story. Like it pulls you back into that fantasy world of like good looking people and crazy stuff happening to them. So.
Yeah. Well, I do always appreciate a creator who can exercise restraint
Yeah.
and really just like deliver in like key moments, because I think that just makes the moments all the sweeter, you know.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm.
But
We always gush over Paul Pope.
we do.
I'm curious if you guys have any criticisms of his art. If there are any, if you ever hit points where you're like, huh, why does he do it that way? Because for most of my life I haven't. I wonder if I'm starting to sort of have some, or if I'm like, no, I'm just trying hard to finally find something.
There are a few moments in this book where there was one scene in particular where it feels a little too abstract, and I think that's one of the main criticisms I've seen of this book, is that a lot of the one of the main criticisms is that there's not a lot of strong dialogue because it feels very clipped, because and I would say that obviously that's done on purpose because it's trying to make it sound realistic, because again that's another sort of like a conventional superhero thing where you have the panel of two characters both punching at each other at the same time, and they both have a dialogue, like they're having a conversation in the middle of this half-second punch.
Right.
And that's I think that's the magic of comics, is that you can like expand and condense time to capture these moments that represent everything that's happening, and that's great. But you know, you can also do things like what Paul Pope is doing here, where he's just throwing you into the action, and he's specifically controlling time in the sense that he's controlling how fast it moves along, and by not giving you the full conversation is just the way people would normally talk in that. But there's a few panels where the scene actually at the very beginning where he's hiding in the apartment and the kid gives him the Superman toy in that last panel. I remember thinking is there's a huge time leap there. Like he's hiding in the room. He's talking to the kid gives him the toy, and then the next panel he's outside of the building on the roof jumping onto another roof. Like that's a tremendous leap in time, and like of stuff that happens there. And I remember the first time I read that, I was thinking, like, I wasn't sure if there was something supposed to be implied there, or if it was just condensed for time, or did I miss something, you know, else on the page that, you know, but I don't think there was. I think it was just a simple, like, the kid made the gesture and Batman just kind of had this moment where he was about to say something and then it gets cut off and we're just back into the action.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Kind of a jump cut.
Yeah, it was like a jump cut. Yeah, exactly. And I think I like on rereads, like it's maybe it's just because I just make excuses for Paul Pope and I like him, but like it doesn't bother me. But it was like, that is the kind of thing that, like, when I first read it, I kind of had to like look at it again to see if I missed something, like what was going on there. And I can see how people read, because like if you're just like casually reading the page, I mean, it's implied, you know, you can infer that it's Batman in that final panel, but there's really, like, if you're just not really paying attention, just glossing over the panel, you might miss that silhouette in the sky that's supposed to be Batman, and your eye might just assume it's something else, like some other ink blot on the page.
Right.
But yeah, I think that there are a few moments in this book maybe where he's a little too just like a little too abstract with his cuts between scenes. But not like, that's the only one that I would specifically point out that like caught me off guard for a second.
Gotcha.
Okay, so now I'm just looking and reading again.
Right, yeah.
I'm tracking. Yes.
So let's talk a little bit about the story, because that's really what drew me to this book and why it's my favorite. Like, Paul Pope is one of my favorite artists, and I really like Paul Pope. But I think that this actually is one of the best Batman stories ever written. And I guess I can't deny the fact that it's a very political book, in a way. I mean, I guess okay. So I don't talk about it a whole lot, but I also don't make a big secret of it. But I'm kind of libertarian,
Mhm.
and I'm pretty libertarian, actually, you could say. And this book is like very libertarian in its main themes and
Mhm.
just the character motivations and just almost everything about it. This is like I really do think that this is sort of one of the best libertarian interpretations of a superhero.
Yeah, it's kind of like a lot like The Incredibles.
It
I mean,
is, yeah.
it
Well,
has its own sort of, and we can get into this in a minute, kind of alternate universe, like implied, like Cold War went differently sort of thing.
mm-hmm.
But yeah, there's also this big thing about superheroes needing to be reined in. There need to be an end to capes that it doesn't jive with the need for control.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but
Well, I think
which is also kind of a libertarian story.
well, I mean, and the thing is too, comics have a history of being political. I mean, the one of the greatest superheroes ever created, Captain America, was created as a political statement.
Mhm.
And I mean, even one of the greatest comic book artists to ever live, Steve Ditko, who created Spider-Man, among other characters. He is an incredible objectivist, Ayn Rand follower. He's a Randian objectivist, like full on
Over the top objectivist.
yeah, like an over the top objectivist.
Sure.
So like, so and I mean, you could even go like the comics in the '70s. Steve Gerber was very political with the stuff he was writing, and it's even all the stuff that's going on right now currently. It's comics has never really shied away from politics, but I think that Batman Year 100 is kind of unique in that I guess the only way I can put it, I don't know if I can say this without sounding kind of maybe pretentious, but
Go on.
I feel like the perspective of Batman Year 100, which I think is a very libertarian perspective, is probably the most not subtle. I don't want to say subtle, but it's like the least preachy about it, because I think that a lot of these themes and the positions being taken are really fundamental ideas that everybody among all political persuasions hold dear to, like, some degree or another. And so I think that you're not going to find, like, you're going to find liberals and you're going to find Republicans who are against hypocritical bad guys in power, abusing their power. And you're going to find people on both sides of the aisle that kind of agree with a lot of the stuff presented here. But it's presented in what I would say is a very libertarian stance, which I keep saying libertarian over and over again. And basically what I mean is a individualistic, anti-authoritarian position. And I think that that's kind of the root, fundamental American spirit almost. So I think that a lot of people just kind of like, I think a lot of people like feel camaraderie with that idea, whether or not they identify as a liberal or a conservative or an independent or even a libertarian or whatever.
Sure.
But okay, so I feel like I'm kind of rambling here, but I think it's important to remember the context of when this book was made, because this was made in 2006, I believe. So 2005, 2006. So we're talking post 9/11. This would be like, I think that this book really was written in 2007. Okay, so 2007. So several years after 9/11, after we've seen the Department of Homeland Security kind of in full swing and the war on terror. And this book is, like all great speculative fiction, really just taking what was currently going on and extrapolating it to extremes that you might see in the near future. And shockingly, I really don't think that this book is that far off. Like, it's not like it's I mean, we're still a few years away from 2036, but this still feels like something that could easily be in our future,
Sure.
Yeah.
There's a really interesting melding of these sort of like if you handed it to someone now and you didn't let them read, if they didn't know when it was written
Mm-hmm.
and they weren't into, I don't know, libertarian ideas, they might read it and be
Or
like,
even just like politics talk in general. Yeah.
right. Well, they might read it and they might be like, he said laissez-faire at one point, and
Yeah. Yeah.
he shared that virus with everyone, and I thought that mutually assured destruction thing was kind of weird.
Yeah.
I
There's
don't know
a
if I'm
few
totally into that.
buzzwords.
But when you add when you contextualize it, like his world building is really fascinating to me in this
Mm-hmm.
comic. You have these government police agencies that are basically set up like sports teams.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you have one of the top enforcers being this weird rockabilly cowboy.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, wait a second, like if you didn't know this was 2006, maybe just be like, that's just some weird flavor he's throwing in. Well, when you dial it back and you're looking at like the Patriot Act and you're looking at like happening, post 9/11, it's like, oh, like he's playing with a lot of that stuff, and it's not just a straightforward like,
right,
the lefties versus the anti-authoritarians or whatever. It's
right.
He actually is addressing some things very specific to that time.
Yeah, I agree, and I guess that's why, like, there's, as you mentioned, like he says laissez-faire. Like, there's a few buzzwords in it that kind of stand out. Like, there's a point where one of the characters mentions John Locke, which of course we all know is that famous character from the TV show Lost. But yes, exactly. But like there's that. There's there was something else. There's like a few like key moments where it's just like, I think that would probably gloss over a lot of people, especially when it was written, because I think that nowadays everyone's kind of more like tuned in or even triggered by specific types of words. Like everybody thinks everything's like a dog whistle nowadays. So it's like you hear a word and you're trained to have a specific response. Like you either know that that's my guy or that's not my guy, depending on the types of language that they use. Yeah. And but that's enough of the commentary of current politics. As far as the book goes, I think that it's pretty. It's actually pretty sparing. Like I don't think it goes overboard. It doesn't feel like like preachy or propaganda. Like it's not like some big. Like I've been talking about it a lot about how great it is for libertarians, but I really don't think that it is like propagandistic.
Well, maybe you didn't feel that way. I didn't really feel that way, but I don't know. Taryn, what did you think? Did you feel like he was kind of selling his ideology, or did it feel heavy-handed? I
would say no. I will also say that I'm fairly apolitical. Mm-hmm. So if there were these clues or cues, a lot of them or all of them probably went over my head.
Uh-huh.
But the bigger picture of kind of that sense of like, where's the justice in this or the injustice, or where mm-hmm. is where are freedoms and who are these freedoms for? Like mm-hmm. just like reading it on that level, I did think it was really like appealing. Mm-hmm. Like I wanted to stand behind the story. Like I wanted to believe in the story that it was telling, because it's like, even in this really bleak, desolate thing, like you find people that are determined enough and that are like willing to put it all on the line enough, and they can make a change even in this really bleak setting. And I think that's the kind of thing we all need when you do think about these kind of political quagmire type situations. And so I also did think it was a little weird, like when it got to the end, it's like, well, why would he give out this weapon? Mm-hmm. And then he does clarify, he's like, well, I didn't give out the whole thing, I gave enough, and I also gave out the cure. Right. So it's like, it's this like strange way of approaching a really prickly topic, but it's all done by this one man, mm-hmm. making his decisions on what he thinks is best. And it was just really fascinating to see it be a lot more, I don't know, nuanced and unpredictable than maybe a more shallow story would have been. So, if I could sum it up, then I would say I'm not quite sure where it felt like it lay politically for me, but I knew that it felt right for Batman.
Yeah.
It felt right for what the story was conveying.
Well, that kind of goes with what I said about how at its base, I think that it is just that kind of that American individual exceptionalism that I can understand. Maybe a lot of people don't like that, but I think that a lot of people just tune into that naturally, and I don't think that it's even uniquely an American thing. I think the idea that
power is being abused.
Yes, that's what I'm saying. Yeah, like
Batman's raging against that.
The underdog story, is something that everybody relates to. Yeah. But so now that you've brought the ending up, let's talk about the ending. Because this is another thing that I think is which makes it kind of a very individualistic libertarian thing, is the idea of somebody created a super weapon, and all of this, the whole story, the whole mystery, the whole framing of Batman for this murder, everything was about trying to gain sole possession of this super weapon. And Batman saw that the only way to fight against that was to make it so that everybody could have control of the super weapon. And that's basically the argument for the Second Amendment, in a nutshell. That's the idea that everybody has a right to own guns, and that's the only way to have true control over yourself is to have control over your self-defense. And if you're stripped of that, if somebody else has power over you, then you do not have control over your life. And I can see that that's a thing that makes people uneasy, because that's also the situation that we find ourselves in the world finds itself in with the creation of nuclear weapons. And everybody needs nukes, and we've decided that some people shouldn't have nukes, but we can't stop some people from developing it if they want to, and it becomes this sticky situation. And you can argue about how terrible nuclear weapons are, but I think an argument can be made. I'm not enough of a history buff to make this argument, but I think an argument can be made that America and Russia both having nuclear weapons is what prevented war for 40 years. And it's what has prevented a world war from breaking out in 80 years. I'm not going to make the case that it's the best possible scenario, but
there's a lot to consider there.
There's a lot to consider, right? But
sure.
We need a historian.
Yeah, was it that everyone had them, or was it that one person had enough of them that they played police, or was it?
Right.
There's a lot of slants here.
There's a million angles to it, right? But I think that ultimately that's what makes the ending to me really satisfying, is that I think that it's not necessarily the weapon that's like the climax. It's not necessarily that Batman's giving the weapon to everybody. It's in doing so, he is completely destroying the ability to have power with it, the consolidation of power.
Yeah.
And ultimately, I think that that's kind of what this book is about. It's fighting against a consolidation of centralized power over the citizenry.
Yeah. It's not a standard Batman.
It's not. Because it's not.
He really went his own direction.
He did, and that's something else I'm going to bring up in just a second. But the only other thing I'll kind of mention to drive home the point about another one of the main themes of the book, and also ties into the time period that it was written in. When it's weird to think about that this book was written before all of the NHS scandals about how they're compiling information. This was before Edward Snowden leaked stuff.
Okay.
And it's weird because that's really what this book is about. This book is about, in the future, there's no privacy. The government knows everything, and they have complete control over you, and they will use that information to to destroy you or help you or whatever. And Batman, as the figure, as the mythical figure, he is the chaotic element that they don't know who he is. And I think that's one of the strongest aspects of this book. And incidentally, it's also one of the most highly criticized aspects of the book. That the fact that it's never revealed who Batman is. Like there are a lot of people that are upset. I don't know about a lot of people
by like fans.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, exactly.
Criticized by like user reviews on Amazon. That kind of.
So I have a few Amazon reviews that I might read in a second, so we could talk about them. But I personally love, like, because there's that moment where he's at the end where he's fighting and the guy's like screaming at him like, "Who are you?" And Batman says, "You'll never know."
Yeah,
and that's the end of it. That's it. That's all that matters, is that there's somebody.
Was that a missed opportunity though? Like,
okay,
I really like. This is kind of a detour.
All right, no, yeah.
The point that's the point that being made is that he exists outside of the system, outside of control. He's the
right
glitch in the machine that can't be controlled and tracked. Who are you? And he says, "You'll never know." Could he have said, "I am Batman"? And would it have been the same thing? I really wondered. Like, I guess that was maybe that's the whole point, is that Pope was subverting that, or saying it's the same thing.
Maybe that would have been okay. I won't argue. That would have been a great moment for the "I'm Batman" line. The only thing I can say is he did already sort of do that earlier when the telepath was like controlling him and trying to get him to reveal his identity. And he's like, tell me who you are. And he keeps saying, I'm Batman. Like he thinks Batman over and over again. Yeah. So if we didn't have that scene, I would be upset that he doesn't say I'm Batman in that climax. Yeah. But I get what you mean on a just like a visceral emotional level. Like that's that's your catchphrase moment. Like that's your
right.
But I gotta admit, I do really like the "You'll never know" line. Like I do. It just drives home the point so well.
Yeah.
Right.
It's not bragging. It's just truth.
It's just the truth. Yeah.
Never know. Yeah. Yeah. I there's so many good little bits in there. Mm-hmm. Agent Propska.
Yeah.
Yes.
I'm forgetting what it was.
It's like a Polish name, I believe.
Yeah, Propska.
He's not in the book all that much.
No, he's not.
And he's basically just this guy who needs to be in control.
Mm-hmm.
This government agent who can't deal with their not being in control. And you get his backstory through other characters. Like about how he showed up at this asylum where they were
Arkham Asylum,
and he made them disappear.
Yeah,
like he is the guy who's going to make the perfect world, so long as he has control of things. And
right.
And that's really all. He's pretty much a one-man character.
Well, yeah, and I think that again that works in service to what this story is trying to convey, which is the idea that if you're going to have this centralized agency that has unlimited control over people, like to the ability where you can just like go in and just like kill everybody in Arkham Asylum because they're unwanted people, then that's a position that's going to attract these types of people, like people that will abuse that power. And it really doesn't matter what their backstory is. All that matters is if you have that position, you're going to have those types of people that are going to get into that position. And that's, again, this goes back to the whole libertarian and, small government argument, is that if you're going to have these positions of high power that are just available, like it's just a matter of pure numbers and time. Like people are going to get into that position who are going to abuse it. And it doesn't matter who they are. You're just
it's fantastic.
Yes.
I wasn't bringing it up as a criticism.
No, I know.
One of the biggest figures behind this entire plot is basically this control-crazy bureaucrat.
Yes, and he's not like a deep. He's not like a deeply fleshed out, flawed character. Like he's a set piece, in many ways for
Mm.
for what the story is about.
This is
But
maybe a random aside, but
Uh-huh.
it's related. There's an anime and a manga that's called Death Note.
Oh
and
yeah, I know Death
spoiler
Note.
alert, if you haven't read Death Note, go read it first, because spoiler alert.
I have the first volume on my bookshelf.
Nice. Yeah, it's that same thing that actually when you have that sort of power, that even a person might go in and say, oh, well, other people maybe would do bad things with it, but I'm a good person, so I will do the right thing.
Right.
It doesn't matter. And that almost makes it worse. Like, it's that idea that, no one is immune to the sway of what power.
Yeah. That's
so, yeah.
J.R.R. Tolkien wrote an entire fantasy series based around this.
Yeah.
Called Lord of the Rings. You might have heard of it.
Can no leader go untainted?
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that actually what you brought up there, Alex, and Taryn to a lesser degree, but mostly Alex, is so how do you think that this book operates as a book, like as a Batman story? And I realize that that's an awkward question, so I'm gonna ramble on for a second, kind of clarify what I mean.
Please.
Is this like? Do you think this is supposed to be it could sort of work as an in-continuity story, like as an in-continuity book, like this is a version of Batman that exists in the future. Is it supposed to be an Elseworlds tale where it's like an alternate timeline, like with an alternate past? Or is this, like, I guess what I'm saying, I'm having a hard time getting my words out here. Is this something where all the other Batman books are in continuity and this is just the future of that? Or is this, because like DC does that where they do standalone stories that are really not connected to anything. They're just, fun interpretations of the characters. And you'll see, I mean, Superman Red Sun. I know that's a book you're familiar with. That's just like an Elseworlds book where it's just the Superman DC characters kind of in this unique world. It's not really tied. It's a reimagination. It's, I don't know. It's a new interpretation of these myths in a different situation. I really like this book because I think it operates as just like a possible future for Batman, the character or the mythological figure, not necessarily Bruce Wayne, because there's that element to it where, again, it's never stated who he is. Like, is he 140-year-old Bruce Wayne? Is he somebody that took over the mantle? But if we're doing like real history, then Bruce Wayne was from 1939, and that means there had to be several Batman between then and now. You know what I mean?
Right.
I am also of the opinion that it doesn't really matter because Batman it's a fictional story and it's a myth. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Does any of that make sense to you?
I think so. Yeah. You want to go first?
I think he cleverly sets it up such that if, the DC overlords at some point decided they really needed the Batman Year 100 verse to somehow be tied into a large event.
I'm almost surprised we didn't get that with all the different. I mean, when they brought all the Watchmen characters in, you know what I mean? Like,
they've defiled Watchmen, but Batman Year 100 is okay.
Batman Year 100 remains pure. I'm so happy.
I think it doesn't matter, but I think Pope cleverly set it up such that you could really speculate forever. Like, he leaves it open.
Yes.
Which, I don't know. What do you think, Karen?
Yeah. Not having a wider tapestry of comic knowledge. Like you guys, a lot of what I have to work with is just what's right in front of me. So as an encapsulated story, it doesn't need anything more.
Mm-hmm.
It leaves such a open border all around it that it's like, oh, well, what about this world that we're in? Or like, what about this particular character? What about, how they portrayed Robin this time? Like, you could see all these things. It's like, what about that thing when he was meditating with the candles? Like, there's all these places where I was like, I want more, but it's like, I don't need more. And I think because there were all these tantalizing open doors, that it's like, I didn't feel like I didn't get my money's worth, but there's so much more that could be said. And then it's like, but it wasn't said. And so what is here is enough. And it does, again, almost, well, okay, so Tolkien wrote like a whole textbook about his world. But in like The Hobbit, for example, there's this big old world, and he alludes to it through various methods, but you don't actually need that whole story to still enjoy The Hobbit. And he does that so well with this that I would almost be like a little disappointed if he did go in and over explain all these things. Like, I like that it gets to stay kind of shrouded in that darkness. Like, it thematically suits the material, that you're like, okay, so this was a little hazy, but he just left it at that. All right. And I think in terms of the bigger narrative about how it might plug into everything else, it's just like, it almost feels more like like a biblical or like a Greek myth. Like, you're seeing it as bigger than it is, and it's done with certain language that makes it able to transcend its time to a certain degree. Stylistically, no, but like the bigger themes, like, and that anonymity of Batman makes it so that you almost get a sense of like these epic proportions in a regular human man, which we know, like, from understanding anthropology and stuff of like Greek myths and stuff, like, they made them up, but like they probably based them on real human things, like real human foibles and real human strengths. And because you can see that in him, or in the Batman figure, it gets kind of this timeless or this kind of mythological quality that I think doesn't need more explanation and doesn't really warrant delving deeper into this particular like snippet that you get to see here. Now I'm the one rambling, so that's all.
That's okay. I guess one thing that I'd sort of been thinking about, and I hadn't really like clicked in my head, like what I was kind of getting at, but it just clicked now. So if you've read any other Batman Elseworlds stories, I don't know if you have. Like I've talked about a few. I did a podcast once several years ago. Like, there's a book called Batman Noir, which is it's written by Ed Brubaker and art by Sean Phillips.
Okay.
Yeah, the Criminal, the guys that do Criminal.
Yeah.
And it's like taking the idea of Batman but kind of setting it in a 1940s detective novel. So Bruce Wayne is a private detective. He's hired to protect some girl, Selena Kyle, the Catwoman character. And the Joker ends up being this, like, there's an escaped guy, lunatic from an asylum who like killed himself. He's sort of like an analogy for the Joker. Like Harvey Dent is like a lawyer. The Penguin is like a crime boss, but it's all in the 40s, and he's like a detective and not Batman.
Okay.
And then there's like what was it? The Mike Mignola book. It's like Steampunk Batman or something like that.
Sure.
And
like
it's
Gotham by Gaslight or something.
Yeah, Gotham by Gaslight. That's it. I don't know what sort of steampunk Batman.
Yeah,
but and that's set in like the late 1800s, and Bruce Wayne is more of like a Sherlock Holmes figure, and he goes to Whitechapel, and there's a serial killer, Jack the Ripper, and it's like the Joker, and it's sort of taking these archetypical characters that are in Batman, or these mythological versions of these characters, the Batman, the Joker, and whatever, and just repositioning them into different types of stories.
Yeah.
What I find interesting about Batman Year 100 is that Paul Pope doesn't really do that. He's just telling a unique new Batman story with essentially all new characters, and I think that's what throws a lot of people off, because they're expecting to see a book like this. They're expecting to see the guy in charge of Homeland Security is actually the Joker. Like, it's revealed, like he takes off his fright wing, and they're expecting like the leader of the cops to be something, and all these other characters to kind of exist, and they really don't. Like, there are no villains in this book, and I think that's what at first kind of throws you. Like, if you're used to watching Batman take out, like, punch villains, villain of the week. I mean, like, everything about Batman is about the new villain that he's chasing after.
Yeah.
Right.
And even from the beginning, that's not really set up like this. There's not even much of a tease that there's a villain.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that that's kind of what goes with what you said at the beginning of our discussion, Alex, how you said it's not like regular Batman books. And I think that plays into it. Like, it's so much bigger than a regular Batman story. It's not about one guy, trying to fight another guy. Like, it's about a guy that's wrapped up in this larger than life story about corrupt fascist government,
There's also a bit that I didn't really think about before that kind of struck me when I reread it, where they're talking about the flesh killer virus and they're talking about the immensity of the problem.
Yeah.
And there's one panel where Batman's like, "What is crime?"
Yeah, I love it.
Like, this is bigger than all that stuff in the past. Yeah. Like, we're talking about like bigger issues, but Batman's still like relevant.
Yeah.
In some way.
Well, that was actually a great moment. That was kind of our Alan Moore 1980s comic moment where it's like, we're not just fighting guys in bad costumes anymore. This is serious and real, that's sort of like very overtly stated. This ain't your daddy's Oldsmobile Batman comic anymore, But yeah, that moment, I think that moment worked really well. Like at first I was kind of like, oh, here we go. Like, this is our comics aren't for kids anymore moment,
Right.
Yeah.
But it ended with Batman saying, "What is crime?" And just like very bluntly, just kind of like shirking it all off and just being like, we don't have to pontificate about the meaning of it all.
Right.
Like,
it could have gotten super preachy there too.
Yeah, it could have. Yeah.
The real criminals are
the corrupt. Yeah. Are the CEOs of the $1 million companies that are poisoning their customers and the corrupt politicians. Like,
right.
yeah.
He asked the question, and maybe you could even say a little that is implied, but he moves on right away.
He moves on. He's just
like, I'm going to hit you in the face with it. It's like, you just
that kind of goes into what I was saying earlier about how it's if it's not subtle, it's at least not preachy. I think there's some kind of balance in there. Like I think that its intentions are pretty much on the surface, but I don't think it comes across as like overtly preachy or shallow in
not by any means,
the story. Yeah. And that just ties into why I love it so much, like why I think it's so great.
Yeah.
Does that magical thing where it taps into themes that transcend the current moment, and years later it's still relevant.
It's still relevant.
Like, we enjoy it and talk about it, and it doesn't just read as some tacky. I don't know.
This is completely unrelated, but I need to mention at some point the very last panel.
Mm-hmm.
Try not to hurt your book. It shows Batman. Oh, it's backwards.
Yeah.
It shows him running away in a way that, I almost laughed out loud because I'm like, what is he doing? He's just like,
yeah.
Away he goes. But it's still, it has the brushstroke style of almost like a what's it called? A sumie, like a Japanese brushstroke, like the kanji. And even the way, he signs a signature in that red block,
Yeah.
And so there's something really beautiful and ennobling about this final shot with the red and the black. It's very piercing, but then it's also like, whoa, what is he doing? It's so funny, but it's such a good, it seems like in one panel you can actually get what he's trying to get at is like, this is comics. I'm using a comic book, but I'm talking about the deep shit. Or, sorry, I don't know.
That's fine.
But
it's fine.
Yeah.
I love that last panel
it's so
much.
great.
Oh, well.
It's perfect panel.
Me too.
It's so good. I wonder how much time he spent thinking about that panel, or if it was just no, that's what it's all about.
Right.
If it was just that's what it had to be.
Right.
Well, this page is kind of another.
He's running like a maniac.
Yes. This panel is this page even is kind of another example of what I'm talking when I mentioned that Paul Pope's characters are unsexy in a way, because I just have to imagine in a typical Batman comic, he would be on the roof, the bat plane would pull up and he would jump off the roof and fly off. Or you wouldn't even go that far. You would just have him and Gordon on the roof, and then he would whoosh his cape and just be gone, like Santa Claus,
Right.
and
Yeah.
this one is like very overt. Like he's just like they're standing in the doorway. Batman turns around and he's just running through the woods, which is how a normal person would leave.
Right.
Yeah. It captures something else too, though, that like it's unsexy, but it's so visceral.
It's visceral,
like,
yeah.
Yeah.
You ever? Maybe this is. I don't think this is unique to me. Go for a jog or a run at night, and you feel like you're going extra fast.
Yes.
Yeah.
I recommend
Yes.
trying it sometime.
Oh, yeah.
Like
It's
jog
a
at night
really-
when it's cooler and when the lights are out and everything's like you don't really see as well, and it's just like whooshing. It's like
Yeah.
going like taps into some like feeling that's.
Yeah.
I've never stood on top of a building and stared like intensely into the distance with my cape blowing,
Yeah.
but I've run like a maniac into the dark before.
It's like flag football in college. And it's true, like running at night it's a different thing.
It's different, yeah.
It captures something. Like
Yeah.
there's a lot in that image. I don't know. I
Yeah.
like it.
No, it's a great image.
Yeah.
So I think we're all agreed, like it's a fantastic book. Do you want to hear some negative reviews for it?
Sure.
I don't know how long we've been going here. But well, okay, so like there are negative reviews that are just like this book is dumb, 1 star. I don't care about that. I'm always interested in like the people that leave like really long reviews that like
a paragraph.
or more.
They're trying to give it a more thorough critical breakdown as to why it's bad. It's not just someone who's butthurt because they didn't see the Penguin or whatever.
Exactly, yeah. So let's see. Let me see what this one here is. I have. Let's see if I can pull it up. 2-star review. I had always heard amazing things about Year 100, and after finally getting a chance to read it, I'm underwhelmed. There are some good elements, and the art is very gritty, fitting the tone nicely, but there's too much unsaid. We never learn anything about how this world came to be, and it's very hard to connect the familial dots. Overall, it's only for completists. How do you feel about that one?
The wrong attitude to bring to this comment.
Yeah. It's like, I'm angry because I wasn't spoon-fed. I don't like to think.
Well, I think it goes back to the idea that a lot of Batman readers are like not just completionists, but they read the story for the character.
Yeah.
And they just like the idea of Batman as a character, and they don't. The ideal is secondary. Like I think that plays into a part of it. Like a lot of people just want to be told like exactly what happens. So the whole mystery, the way it's all left open of like, is it Bruce Wayne? Is it not? Because I actually, we didn't really talk about this. I like the way it's done in the book. The way they're like, oh, voice recognition and handwriting is the same as the same guy in 1939. That's that's uncanny. And then they immediately write it off, and they're like, or Gordon is the one who writes it off, and he's like, that can all be copied. Voices can be copied. Signatures can be copied. That's not that spectacular. And, there's things like I think Paul Pope just does a great job of, as you've already said, leaving it completely open and giving you just enough of each side so that it's basically whichever you want it to be,
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I guess I could see, if I were a hardcore Batman fan,
yeah,
and I read my Batman comics for a specific reason, this is an outlier. It doesn't fit with a lot of those other stories.
Right.
So I might not like it. But I think if you come to it with a larger, tell me a good story, tell me a story that has a bigger, deeper intent, there's obviously there's a lot to enjoy here.
So here's another review from a Batman fan. A lot of people have talked about the story itself, but I find the concept behind the story is utterly flawed. In particular, Batman just doesn't work within a story based on oppressive government and conspiracy. How can I believe that Batman deserves the freedoms which he fails to extend to anyone else, good or bad? ? I could believe that Captain America would turn against a government requiring identification for all superheroes and be in the right. Captain America is a by-the-book guy who already works for the government. So as a non-criminal, by what right does the government demand his identity? By comparison, Batman is a figure completely above the law. He shows no regard for secrets or privacy. He is every bit the controlling power that the government is, and thus fails to provide any juxtaposition between the good and the bad. I have a hard time following what the intent of that comment is.
I mean, yeah, it's a little hard to follow.
Yeah.
Maybe it's kind of a Who Watches the Watchers issue, like.
Right.
Sounds like just some spineless statist who just wants nanny government to take care of him. I'm just teasing. But there's
like, yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, but that's kind of implying that Batman has this amazing, limitless power. He almost dies, like
right.
He felt bleeding out on the carpet, and he probably would have like.
He's not controlling anyone.
Yeah, he's
well,
not.
That's the thing is, I think that's a lot of people mistake the distinction of individual action and equating it for like centralized force, government action, and it's just it's not the same. You know, individual speaks for an individual. He doesn't speak on behalf of other people. He doesn't exert force on other people on behalf of other people. Everything that an individual does as an individual, and as a result, Batman is taking full personal responsibility for everything that he does.
Yeah.
But anyway, there's one other. The real reason I like this review. It's really long, and I'm not reading the whole thing. But the final point is, in short, Batman Year 100 suffers from many of the issues that high-minded comics suffer from. It seeks to be more than it is, and certainly it seeks to be more than is given to the reader. Avoid. That's a 1-star review.
Avoid.
Wow.
Avoid.
Sandwich.
Yeah.
Dang high-minded comics. So high-minded.
So high-minded. I'm gonna go back to the low-minded ones.
Yeah. So
right? They don't fight with each other. Yeah. You can have both.
But I guess I just wanted to give an idea of like what some of the like extremely negative reviews on Amazon are. I really don't feel like reading all of them because I don't want to just sit there and laugh at people because it'll make me seem like a snob. And although I am a snob, I don't want to put it on display for the internet, repeatedly. But I do think it's. I guess I'm interested in bringing it up just to kind of drive home or reiterate this point that it's not like a regular Batman comic, so I can see why regular Batman fans might not be into it. But I think it's also, I guess part of the other reason that I like this book so much is I'm just happy that DC made it, that they let it be made. Sure. Like.
Sure.
Every now and then, like a real book can get published.
A diamond in the rough.
Yeah.
Yeah, they let an auteur creator run with their top property.
Yeah.
And I think to DC's credit, they do that every once in a while.
They do. Marvel too, honestly. I don't know if they have as strong a history as DC of letting like auteurs just do standalone things and just I think ever since the success of Dark Knight Returns, DC has sort of been like every now and then maybe we'll just try to do another one of those,
That's probably Watchmen as well.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Oh, Watchmen too. Yeah.
Worked out well for them. So
worked out very well.
Write those 12 issues. Impressive artist guy.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. I mean, yeah, and then that led to Vertigo, and the rest is history. And now Vertigo is history.
Womp, womp.
I say that after they've already announced their new line, but that's not what we're going to talk about.
See what happens.
Yeah, we shall see. But So I don't know. I guess I don't know if I have much else to say about Batman Year 100. Any final thoughts, Alex?
Just like it.
Yeah. Oh, so I actually did just remember one thing. So again, one of the going back to this complaint of people kind of don't understand who these characters are. Like, is this Bruce Wayne old or immortal? Is this what's going on? I think part of the confusion comes from the fact that Commissioner Gordon is Jim Gordon. But I think it's spelled out pretty clearly in the book that he's a descendant of the original Jim Gordon.
Like his grandson?
Yeah, he's his grandson. He kept referring to the old man. But because none of the other characters, like Robin is just called Robin. He's not called like Dick Grayson or whatever. He's just called Robin. And the other girl, Cass, because I think it's what her name was.
The doctor was Chris, and the girl is her daughter.
But but they like filled the role of the Oracle, or like some of the other characters, but they're not explicitly named. Like, it's not Barbara Gordon. You know what I mean? So
I think that's part of what I like it so much is there isn't an Alfred, there isn't a Joker, there isn't. But there are characters that are kind of in those roles.
Yes, that's what I was getting at. So I think some people just kind of get confused because in a way it's almost like a twist on that Batman Elseworlds thing that I was telling you about, where you take all of the named characters and you put them in a different story. And this one, it's like you're creating a Batman story, but you're pulling all these other characters and putting them in the traditional Batman roles.
Right.
And I guess that's why I like it so much, because it's a new thing, but it's still Batman. Like, it's still
Yeah. I mean, I do think it deviates, but it gets
Sure.
Like there is no wealthy alter ego. It doesn't even exist.
Right.
Like, there's a lot that is, I think, a pretty big departure from Batman.
Oh yeah. Like, but it's not. Yeah, you're not seeing the Playboy, like you said, Alfred. There's no Alfred. Like,
right.
And there, as I said, there's no Joker. There's no villain dynamic. And I guess that's what. I agree. It is a departure, and I think that's what makes it kind of like a weirder Batman story as far as Batman goes. But
do they even call it Gotham?
Why we like it so much.
It is Gotham. Yeah, it is called Gotham. Yeah.
I don't even remember when they said it. So, but I'm also I read fast, so.
I read fast and I forget things.
The federal police is like football teams, was just hilarious.
I think that's another thing that kind of catches people off guard, because it's just like the rest of this world is so like Blade Runner, like it's real, it's that dark cyberpunk dystopian, and then the feds are all running around in like shoulder pads and football helmets, and but
unique.
It's unique. I like it. It just gives it that comic style, like that thing that can work in comics that wouldn't necessarily work anywhere else.
Yeah.
Where else? Like, you wouldn't. This is not the kind of thing that you would be able to depict in text, like in a prose novel. Like, it just wouldn't come across. It wouldn't translate. Like, because you would have to say something like, the Fed's uniforms all looked like 20th century football uniforms, and you'd have to refer to it like that way. Otherwise,
spend a lot of time explaining.
Yeah.
Throwing out a lot of exposition.
Yeah. And in a movie, like, seeing it all in motion would just look extra silly, probably. Yeah,
it'd be too slapstick or too like random and weird.
Maybe.
I mean, I think you could make it work, certainly. But I do think that it's something that just works really well in comics, and I also think that it's funny. I do think that it's meant to be, fun.
Yeah, it's unique. It's colorful.
Colorful, exactly, because they're all like blue and red. It
was just a bunch of guys in black Kevlar.
Yeah, exactly. Right? It was just like typical SWAT team, It'd just be boring. I agree. And again, that's what makes it a superhero comic, because superhero comics are colorful,
Right. Right.
They're flashy.
Yeah. All right. I have nothing else to say. I love this book. Alex?
I like it a lot. I don't have much else to say.
Darren, are you happy that your husband forced you to read it?
He didn't force me. Okay.
You just pulled it off the shelf.
I pulled it off the shelf and read it because it looked interesting.
You like Paul Pope. I'm gonna read this.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I trust his taste. I haven't been disappointed yet. So.
Well, that worked out really well.
It did.
Indeed.
Okay, well, I think we're going to bring this episode to a close then. Thank you, everybody, for listening. As I said at the beginning of this episode, my name is Aaron Walther. You can find me on Facebook. I'm also on Twitter at AAWALTHER, on Twitter, AA Walther. I have been neglecting my Twitter like nothing. Like, I checked it for the first time in several weeks today. I don't know how people like get addicted to Twitter. Or anything. I guess I just don't have an addictive personality, I guess.
We're old. I don't understand how people browse Amazon on their phones.
Okay, I might have a problem with that, but I have Amazon Prime. But anyway, find the newest comics that I'm working on. I'm working on a comic called American Chop Suey. That's at gocomics.com. And I'm working on a comic called The Uncontrollable Recklass. That's at Tapas. I'll put links in the bio. Thanks, everybody, for listening/watching. And haven't decided what the next episode is going to be. We might discuss that after we officially end the episode. But in the meantime, I don't know when we're going to do it either. Hopefully soon, but we'll see. Sooner or later. Thanks, everybody, for listening or watching, and we will see you all next time.